Mark Skaar with Ricky Phillips from Styx and Bad English and Babies fame, here to talk about a new project that he worked with the late Ronnie Montrose. It's called 10 by 10. Ricky, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. This means a lot to me, and I appreciate you letting me preach the gospel of Ronnie Montrose for a minute.
Well, absolutely. First of all, I bought this record. I've been a fan for a long time. I had an opportunity to visit with Ronnie probably less than a year or about a year before he passed away, and what a shock that was. And so this project was here for you to put together, and it must have been quite painstaking and still exhilarating at the same time.
It was. I knew, I guess the first daunting task is Ronnie really had an exact plan for this record. He knew how he wanted to sound. He knew basically how he kept using the word old school. He wanted to approach it the way we used to make records when everything wasn't done beforehand. He liked to catch that magic of a song, a basic track anyway, being played by a power trio where all three players were recorded live at the same time. And that he would say, okay, we know the arrangement now, just watch me for the changes. And we'd hit the red record light and go into record, and we'd slam down the track. And we maybe took 2 takes of one of the songs, 2 of them maybe. Most of them were first takes, and Ronnie would just say, okay, that's it, we got it. He really was not about... He didn't think music should stay in one tempo, like most producers will make you play to a click track. It's easier to move digitally on a grid, but we recorded on 2-inch tape, so there was no grid and there was no computer until I had to take over the project and move everything over to digital so I could move around the country and record people more easily. But the inception and all of the basic tracks with Ronnie Montrose loud and proud, slamming that incredible guitar sound that he gets with those great riffs, was done all on a 2-inch tape. As a matter of fact, it's the same tape machine, a Stevens machine that they recorded The Wall on. And I had been producing out of this studio and loved the room and the way this room sounded, and I told Ronnie about it. And so Eric Singer, who's the drummer on 10 by 10, and Ronnie and I had developed... we just had some magic between the three of us, and Ronnie recognized it and said, we got to get in. We got to get this down. We've been working off and on for maybe 2 years. And Ronnie said, we got to get this sound down. I've got ideas, and we can jam out some other ideas, and it ended up being 10 by 10.
So 10 by 10 is the project. Ricky, who was the first person that you went to outside of the trio circle to say, hey, I want you, would you be interested in lending a hand on this?
Yeah, let's see. I think maybe Sammy Hagar had done a track. I'll tell you what happened. When we finished and we couldn't find a singer who was versatile enough to really do all this material properly. So that's when Ronnie came up with the idea of the 10 by 10 concept, which is our 10 songs, our 10 basic tracks with 10 different singers. And the joke was always, well, that's great, Ronnie, but we can't find one singer. How are we going to find 10? And he said, no, what I mean is I want to call Edgar Winter, who he'd worked with and was in the Edgar Winter group. Obviously Sammy Hagar, who was in Montrose, and Greg Raleigh, who most people may or may not know. He was in Santana, sings Black Magic Woman, and then started the band Journey with Neil Schon. So he called all of his close friend, Mark Farner from Grand Funk, called Mark to sing on a track. And that's how this thing started. But when Ronnie passed, we only had, I believe, 6 vocals and our basic tracks, and except for Edgar, because Edgar had already done some sax parts that he and Ronnie, it starts off with he and Ronnie answering back and forth from guitar and sax. And on that track, I called up Edgar and I said, hey, man, I know every band's got dirty laundry. Is it cool? My first inclination is to call Rick Derringer, who replaced Ronnie actually in the Edgar Winter group when Ronnie went off and started the Montrose band. And in his Eastern Texas accent. He said, "Well, Ricky, I think that'd be a fabulous idea. I'd love to have Rick on this record. He'd be perfect." So I called up Rick Derringer and told him what we had in mind, what was going on, and would he, grace us with his guitar and presence on the record, and he was all over it. And you've got 3 guys from the Edgar Winter Group playing together on that track. It's called Love is an Art, and just brilliant stuff. It's those guys just know what to do. I was very influenced by the Edgar Winter Group as a kid, and it's just something you don't have to talk. I see why Ronnie kind of. I don't think you can lose that when you realize how great something works. You want to get back to it. If you start getting taken away from it, you realize the inception. Ronnie used to say, if any rock band worth its salt has a power trio at the core, and he felt that all those 3 instruments should go down at the same time and record it old school the way we used to do it. Because once we had a basic track with drums, bass, and guitar, you could put keyboards, background vocals, write melodies, do whatever you want over the top of it, and it's going to be good, as long as that core is good. And so I just approached calling people who I knew Ronnie admired. We talked about. I think one of the guys that I may have called first to answer your question may have been Steve Lukather.
Okay.
Because Sammy, I told Sammy we got to get the right guy on guitar on this, and he had mentioned a couple guys, and I'd never heard Ronnie mention these guys. Not that there was anything wrong with them. So I said, what about Steve Lukather? I know Ronnie really dug Lukather's sense of melody and the way he strings passages together. And Sammy said, wow, can you get a hold of him? I said, yeah, we've been buds forever. I think he'd be into this. And when I got a hold of him, he was actually in Singapore with Pat Metheny doing a short run of shows, and he immediately texted me back and said, oh, man, thanks for getting a hold of me. I'd love to do this. He and Sam had never worked together, so they had a mutual admiration society there. And it's really, through Ronnie, a lot of people who had never worked together the dots got connected between a lot of the people on this project, just through Ronnie digging what they do. And so I really couldn't go wrong with those choices as long as I stuck to it.
We're talking with Ricky Phillips about 10 by 10, the new Ronnie Montrose project. Another guy, of course, you connect the dots to would be Davey Pattison from Gamma.
Oh, yeah. Davey, oh, my gosh. For those Gamma fans out there, Mark Bonilla becomes Ronnie Montrose. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a track, just like the Edgar Winter song, sounds like it may have been lifted from 1974 Sweet Spot of the Edgar Winter Group. Eric Singer's favorite track probably is Mark Bonilla's guitar playing on this track. It's called Head On Straight. Davey Pattison sounds like that British rocker that he is.
Paul Rogers.
I know, mm-hmm. And it's so good. I mean, the Gamma fans are gonna love this one. And Mark Bonilla is one of those, not necessarily a household name, but the people know his playing. He played guitar with Keith Emerson, and before Keith passed, and has just done such great work on progressive, really oriented tracks of all kinds of. If you just look him up, Google him, you'll be able to hear how wonderful he is. But what he did on this couldn't be better.
Yeah, well, and Mark Bonilla kind of sat in with Gamma on the Ronnie Montrose Remembered show, too.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes, he did. And he was Ronnie for that show.
Was Bob James approached?
He wasn't, and I don't know why I figured that Ronnie would have done that when there was plenty of time for him to do that. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I wasn't aware of any contact even being attempted. And I think that wouldn't really, just so people realize, that wouldn't be any slight on Bob James. It would be, Ronnie he would hear tracks, and for example, the song Strong Enough, he said, I think Tommy Shaw would be good on this. And it's a very swampy, bluesy track, and I couldn't figure out who would be able to do that track. And I said, really? And I thought about it, And he wanted to appeal to Tommy's southern roots as an Alabama boy with that sort of blue-eyed soul approach to, kind of probably more like a Damn Yankees approach to what Tommy was doing. And we wrote that. Tommy and I probably wrote the vocals to that track, and he did the singing and all that slide playing he does on there, and I think it was about 3.5 hours. And sent them to Ronnie. But that's Ronnie. He really sees the depth and breadth of certain musicians, and especially guitar players. He and I'd have in-depth conversations about various guys. So I knew who he liked. I've had people say, was it difficult when someone has a complete idea of how they want something to go? Now you've got to produce something through their eyes. Is that a bit daunting? And it's daunting, but it actually made it easier, because if I came to a crossroads where I couldn't make up my mind, I would kind of pull myself back and go, well, what would Ronnie do? And I pretty much 99.9% of the time would know immediately what to do. And Ronnie and I did work together enough to where I knew what he liked. I knew what he didn't like. I would do certain things that he didn't necessarily. He would think, no, I like it when you do this. And he'd always go to you. He wouldn't say, do it my way. It would always be, I'd like it when you... And I'd go, okay, right down to the amps I was using and a 68 Tele bass of mine. That's all he wanted me to play. He loved my 68 Tele through, my SVTs and slamming loud and proud. And that's what most of the record is. I had a couple other basses that I used on the record, but most of it is that bass.
Again, we're talking with Ricky Phillips about the Ronnie Montrose project, 10 by 10. Another great grab. You speak of guitarist Ricky, Dave Meniketti.
Yeah, did he get it or what? See, Dave wasn't my choice. Actually, Eric Martin suggested Dave, and I love Dave. I mean, Ronnie and Eric and I, we did shows with Dave with Y&T, so I knew how good he was. But when in my own process of finishing the production on the record, I had thoughts of what other people would contribute. And Dave was just not in my wheelhouse at that time. Not that it wouldn't have eventually come around to Dave, but it hadn't yet. And I wasn't sure about that choice, because I wanted it to be that rootsy English, British rock and roll thing that Ronnie and I, when we wrote the basic track to that, we were really trying to do a humble pie sort of thing.
Okay.
And might I say that Eric Martin's vocal is brilliant.
Yes, it is.
Brilliant on that track. And so Dave was getting ready to throw it, and I wasn't getting any music from him. I said, Dave, have you been working on it? Well, I'm leaving too. So the night before he leaves, he's up till 2 in the morning recording this guitar track for me. And wow, he just totally, it's the rock guitar player I wanted that I knew Ronnie would dig. He didn't overplay it. He totally just hung on to notes and squawked and squealed and did exactly what I know Ronnie would approve of. And I love what Dave did on that track.
Yeah, phenomenal talent and just so blues-based, just tasty.
Yep.
Yeah. Gosh, I could talk to you all day about this. This is such a fantastic thing, and I'm so thankful. I heard about it probably a year or two ago. I'm so thankful it came to fruition. I know you have to be too.
I am, man. And thanks for taking the time to talk to me and let me spread the word here of Ronnie Montrose 10 by 10, because I think it's an important record and on a lot of levels. Taking myself out of the equation, just being Ronnie's last recordings, it's very strong. And the posse of his comrades and close personal friends who came in to kind of help me out, everybody answered the call and was there in just short order. And it took me 3 years to finish this thing with my rigorous tour schedule with Styx, but we got her done, and I'm so proud of it.
Congratulations, Ricky.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
For Ricky Phillips, I'm Mark Skaar.